Okay, welcome to the November edition of the Amherst Town Planning Board. Could we start with a roll call, please? Here.
Davis.
Here.
Gill.
Here.
Here. Ed Murphy. Here. Travis.
Here. Okay, before we get into a couple of rules and things to go over. First of all, the planning board, us up here, are members appointed as volunteers by the town board. We have final decision-making authority on site plans and subdivisions. We are advisory only when it comes to rezonings and amendments to the comprehensive plan. In that case, we make recommendations to the town board, and they have the final decision-making authority. With each one of these petitions, the petitioner will present to the board on the agenda item. The board will ask questions and converse with the petitioners. The chair will then ask if anyone from the public has comments or questions on that agenda item before them. The questions, if any, will be directed toward the board, but we'll have the petitioner address them afterwards. The planning board will ask the petitioners to address any questions or comments again to the board, but the ones that are from the public. There's a laser pointer up at the podium if you want to use that. If you do use that, I'd ask you to please point it toward the screen that is to my right, to your left. Any items listed under unfinished business will not have public hearings. With regard to time limits, the petitioner will have 15 minutes. The first person from the public to speak on any given agenda item will be deemed the neighborhood or resident spokesperson. That person will have 15 minutes. Any other individual speakers on that same agenda item thereafter will be limited to 3 minutes each. And one final thing, if there is an emergency of some kind, I'd ask everybody to head back out those doors and back in that direction behind you. In other words, don't come up here behind us to this doorway here. Okay, well, let's move right over to issue number 1. 3750 Millersport Highway, 2360 Hopkins Road.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Corey Auerbach from the law firm of Barclay Damon on behalf of the applicant. We're here seeking your authorization for a proposed parking lot expansion at 580. This is the Crosspoint facility. This is city, and there's a little bit to explain, particularly as it relates to the property to the east of 580. There was a taking by New York State for a portion of the property that's being utilized for a relocation of Hopkins Road. This parcel will be the last remaining parcel to be merged with the 580 Crosspoint parcel as part of the site plan and lot merger process. The parking lot, if you can go to the next slide, the parking lot proposed is on the presently vacant portion. Again, it will be merged as part of the development. There's no proposed access additional to that along Crosspoint Parkway. In fact, one of the access points along Millersport will be closed. The existing parking at 580, which is shown here in the lighter color, that's all existing parking that will remain. That's approximately 520 parking spaces. The 471 proposed spaces that are darker here in this area have been designed in strict compliance with the town's parking room, interior landscaping requirements, terminal islands. We extend our appreciation to the planning department for their assistance in helping us to strictly comply with those standards. Next slide. Oh, the town slides, you're not going to use those? Yeah. So again, driveway to be removed, as I mentioned. The yellow area is the new area. This orients you a little bit between the two buildings of 540 Crosspoint and 580 Crosspoint. For a little additional background, the 540 building was previously leased from Uniland and housed city's operations. They moved forward and purchased the 580 Crosspoint building, and they're relocating their staff to 580. Next slide. As part of that process, they will lose a significant amount of parking that was previously shared with the other users. So as they exit the lease agreement for 540 and enter into the portion that they own at 580, they give up certain of those parking spaces associated with the lease agreement, giving rise to the need for the construction of the new parking lot associated with 580 so that they can continue to accommodate the approximately 2,000 employees that city has here in the town of Amherst. 7.89 acre parcel, so it's sufficiently sized. Of course, the parking lot has been designed in compliance with the town's stormwater management requirements, significant frontage along Millersport Highway, varying uses to the north, single-family residential office buildings. I think there may have been some concern by some of the public, specifically related to listing of 2360 Hopkins Road as part of the notice requirement. 23 Hopkins Road is this piece right here, this little vacant lot up in the top right corner. Absolutely no development is proposed as part of this process for that parcel. In fact, that parcel will be part of what is owned by the state of New York. The taking was everything to the east of this lot line after the checkered area. It did leave an orphan parcel along the corner of Hopkins Road. That is since in process to be conveyed to the state as well. So I just wanted to clear up the confusion that there's nothing proposed on that parcel in the corner. Next slide. It's just further orientation to where the project is. I know everyone's familiar with Cross Point, zone partially research and development and office building. Previously vacant land that, again, as part of this process, as a condition of site plan approval, will be merged with the 580 parcel before final site plan approval. Was that it on the slides? Yeah, so the 491, it's actually 471 spaces. That occurred as a result of some excellent comments received from the planning department as it relates to creating those parking rooms that are now required under the town of Amherst zoning law. So we did lose a couple spaces and we're down to 471 as part of the approval process. We have corresponded and interacted with the town's many agencies. We received agency comments from the various town agencies to the extent practicable. We responded to all of those. There are a few comments from planning and from engineering that we didn't have a chance to issue formal responses to. The planning comments relate to plan revisions that we will need to make, which of course we will do before the final site plan is approved. The same with the stormwater management SWIP comments, and we're comfortable making those a condition of your approval if you see fit to approve this today. And I have the team here from Ware Malcolm. Our engineers have flown in. If there are specific site civil, drainage, or other questions, we also have a representative here from city to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Auerbach. Any questions from the board? John?
No.
Brittany?
Obviously, your applicant doesn't oppose putting in greater vegetation along Millersport, both for buffering and for visual optics, right?
Yeah, the idea is to make a visually pleasing parking lot that's going to accommodate their needs while being respectful to the surrounding community.
Art?
No questions.
Joe?
No questions?
And Carrie?
No questions.
Okay, is there anyone here in the general public who has any comments or questions? Sure.
Good evening, board members. My name is Jim Zappa. I am the property owner and tax-paying resident at 43 Fawn Meadows Court. And to be respectful of the board's time, I had submitted prior this week a series of my notes. So I won't repeat everything that's on there, but there are certain highlights that bear highlighting. My first concern, which I believe was addressed tonight, was the existing parcel at 3750 Millersport Highway, where the Asbury Church used to be. There is an existing driveway, and as I understand now, that driveway is to be removed and bermed and treed. So that's relief number one. Second concern was for the traffic. As I understand the plan, no egress onto Hopkins Road either. So those were my two major concerns. Because as mentioned previously, this intersection just got a new traffic signal. It was redesigned, and as of 5:25 this evening, the signal had not been activated when I came home from work this evening, so we're waiting to see the impact on that. as mentioned, that reconstruction did take a significant amount of wooded land away. It was deforested and to support this project. And when I talked to the New York State Department project engineer for that, I asked him, well, why the redesign of the intersection? And his response was that this intersection actually had a higher than average accident rate for an intersection of its kind, which is rather interesting because the traffic study submitted as part of this application indicated 0 accidents at Millersport and Hopkins, which I know to be untrue because I live in that neighborhood. I hear the sirens. I've seen the wrecks. And it's not just car-car. There's also car-deer accidents as well. We have a very large population of wildlife, specifically deer in that area. So another thing about the traffic study I found interesting was it uses pre-COVID numbers for its traffic study. The data goes from 2016 to 2019. And I can't help but wonder if remote work or work from home has reduced that volume. So my purpose is not to nitpick the numbers in the traffic study, but if you were to reference that, just take it with a bit of skepticism. Soil and stormwater. Well, that was 306 pages long. That was a rather interesting read. So I'm an engineer. I can read technical drawings and schematics and technical reports. For the life of me, could not understand that report. It was rather cryptic and just incomprehensible. So in terms of stormwater, I would rely on the town expertise in the engineering department to assess the validity and effectiveness of that soil erosion plan as well. I can tell you that it's proposed to drain into, there's a creek that goes here. It's actually identified as Town Ditch 26A. I'm very familiar with the Ditch 26A because I monitor the flood marker for that. It goes under Millersport Highway and services the communities of the Fawn Meadows neighborhood, the Applewood Drive neighborhood, and it even goes so far as to the Davin Drive neighborhood as well. So any water discharge, I hope, is metered. I hope the retention ponds, drainage basins, receivers are all sized adequately for that. And I also can't help but wonder, will the town maintain custody and maintain that, or is this going to go to City Corp for maintenance of that ditch? So, next item, the lighting plan. So this is where I really shine, no pun intended. This lighting plan is actually very good. From all the plans that I've seen, this one is actually very good. And I think with a little tweaks, we can make it even better. So the proposed lighting plan uses a dusk to dawn illumination smart lighting system. Where smart lighting, where it reduces the brightness by 50% after midnight until dawn rather, which is great. I like that, but I would like to see that time pushed back till 10 o'clock p.m. I think that would mean a lot to the neighboring residents in the neighborhoods that surround it as well. And that pushback to 10 o'clock p.m. poses little risk since that smart lighting system has motion sensors in it. So if an employee were to go into the particular lot, that particular zone, yes, it's actually lighting zoned, would illuminate for 15 minutes while that employee gets in their car and exits. And then it extinguishes, reduces back to 50%. So I'm really liking the smart lighting system, but I think we can tweak it a little bit better. The other thing about that 15 minutes auto shutoff is I think that's good because, as I mentioned, we have a large wildlife population, deer, turkeys, coyotes occasionally. I could just see wildlife wandering onto that and tripping that sensor all night long. So that 15 minutes auto shutdown, dimming rather, is proposed, is a good thing. If I am to believe the proposed illumination plan, the maximum value of illumination is 3.5 foot candles, which, okay, I'll believe it when I see it. The current Cross Point parking lot that exists here has an average illumination of 8.2. I took those measurements myself the Wednesday of this week. And interesting, now here's another thing, the pole height. Here's where I think we need to make some changes. The existing plan has a quantity of 17 light poles, each of them 25 feet tall on top of a 3-foot pedestal. That's a total of 28 feet above ground level, which I find unacceptable, and you should too, because it's a direct violation of town code, which limits those light in a parking area to 25 feet. So As a matter of recommendation, I would propose that the light poles be reduced to 15 feet, put that on top of a 3-foot pedestal. Now we're talking 18 feet above ground level, and that would keep those luminaires below the tree line, and again, would go a long ways to satisfying the neighborhood around it as well. Landscaping, as I mentioned, this parcel is heavily treed. We did lose a lot of forestation with the New York State project. I would urge this board to please keep as many of that mature vegetation and trees as we can. I know that was part of the landscaping plan as well. The real concern I have about the landscaping goes along here, along this section of Miller's Part Highway. And as I understand the plan, there's supposed to be, the driveway will be removed, possibly a berm, and then trees planted, alternating between deciduous and evergreen, deciduous and evergreen, so on. Well, that's all fine, except for the fact that deciduous trees lose their leaves in the fall and don't get them back till spring. For that whole duration, we lose the screening effect between the light and the noise that comes from there. So my recommendation here would be to make this part, this section, all evergreen trees. I think that would go a long ways as well to improving this site plan as well. So berms, bushes, and boulders, I don't think we need to go there. So that's it. I think you get the gist where I'm going with this. So I would urge this board to consider those recommendations. And if you would do the site plan approval tonight, I think I would like to see you make those a condition of site plan approval. Thank you for your attention in this matter.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions or comments from the general public? Hearing none, Mr. Alba, oh wait, over here. Come on. By the way, just for future reference, if you're planning on speaking, I would ask everybody to get in line behind the current speaker, just so we know you're there, okay? That's okay, though. Go ahead.
I live on Hopkins near Millersport.
Could I have your name and address for the record, please?
My name is Emma Bird, and Bird is spelled B-Y-R-D. I'm at 2289 Hopkins.
Thank you.
My concern is putting in that parking lot, the wind blowing snow into the road and ice, okay? I would like to see evergreen trees, and he brought up the fact that in the fall, you know, the trees lose their leaves to limit the amount of wind that's blowing into Millersport. Because coming down that road, if you've got less wind blockage, it's going to blow more snow into the road and, you know, icy conditions. That is my main concern. And that the traffic doesn't increase onto Hopkins from the Cross Point Industrial Park. That would increase more traffic onto Hopkins. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Jane Smith, and I don't want to give my address at this point. I am from that area. My family's property is still there. We've been out there over 60 years. But I don't want to be identified at this point. So what I want to talk about is is 580 and 540 all going to become one huge building, or is 540 going to be emptied because it is connected together? Okay. And as far as the ditch road, there's also a work road that was used. There's a pedestrian sign and a crosswalk going to the apex. Just right next to that sign, you can see the open grassway, which is drivable. And I believe, can you go to the yellow pictured, I think it's like the third slide? Yeah. Okay, you can't, is there a red one? Oh, they're green. Can you see where I'm even pointing? No. Yeah, well, look, it's green, but, oh, okay, is there 2 buttons on it? Oh, it's yours, thanks. Okay, so right there is a crossover. Right there is the ditch, and right there is the entrance onto Hopkins Road. There's supposed to be nothing, I don't know how this crossway is going to go, but I wanted to be assured that this driveway, which is already present, is not going to be used in the future, ever. Also, it says you're going to do curbing, shrubs and trees. The ones you have already for 580 Cross Point on Hopkins are shrubs and trees, and they're easy to go around, and they really don't, there's not much curbing except around the islands, and they don't stop snow. I would like to see a berm on Millersport Highway, not quite as big as Canterbury Woods, but I would accept Canterbury Woods berming too. And all evergreens, I agree with that, because when you go down Hopkins or when you go down Millersport and Cross Point, you're on black pavement, which has been salted, and then it's a whiteout or snow on the street because there's nothing stopping it, and you go into a skid, and it's scary as heck. And now when you're taking down the other trees, they're all going to be just as bad. So I'd like to have that addressed also. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other questions or concerns, comments from the general public? If not, okay, Mr. Auerbach, could you respond to what was talked about?
Yeah, there were a lot of comments there, some really good suggestions. I'm sure things that the planning department has taken into account. I know there is some plan revisions that need to be made associated with lighting in response to their last comment, and we're absolutely willing to comply with the recommendations of the planning department as part of the final site plan process. In 2026, City will celebrate its 50th year in the town of Amherst, and they didn't make it to 50 years by not respecting the community where they are and working with the town to make sure that it's a great environment, not only for their 2,000 employees, but for the people in the community. And of course, City's willing to take into account the recommendations as requested and proposed by the planning department and by the planning board as part of their final site plan approval. If there was a specific comment that the board would like me to address, I'm happy to do so.
Why was the proposal for the light pole so high?
Um,
And why not the 15?
Yeah, so the comment that we received relates to dark sky compliant, full cutoff lighting fixtures, and that's absolutely something that they will implement to address concerns, potential concerns about glare. As was noted, there's some excellent technology associated with dimming the lighting, but my understanding is that compliance with the condition that was referenced in the planning department's latest comment will bring the site plan into compliance with the town of Amherst code.
Mr. Robert, a few of them mentioned along Millersport Highway, a preference for a berm and/or consistent evergreen trees across that. If that was a condition, is that something you guys have a problem with?
You know, if the town's landscape architect and the planning board and the planning staff believe that there's some improvements that can be made to the buffering, again, city would be welcome to those suggestions and recommendations from the planning board.
Okay. If the board voted that as a condition, you guys would be okay with that?
We're happy to work with the town planning staff to implement a buffering plan that works for the town, for the planning board. I think that the town's landscape architect might have some thoughts about that condition, and we're willing to work with you and with them on that.
Okay. Any other comments or concerns from the board right now? Okay.
Thanks so
Thank you.
much. Have a happy Thanksgiving.
Seeing you. Okay, moving on to issue number 2. Sketch plan review, 1789 Dodge Road. Mr. Hopkins.
Yes. Good evening, Chairman and members of the Planning Board. Sean Hopkins on behalf of the applicant. Also with me this evening is Joe Rubino. This is a project that you did take a look at, some of you, during your meeting in October. We're back at that point. There was not a quorum in terms of voting one way or another. We have made some changes since then that I'm going to highlight. But we start the history, the relevant history, on July 22nd of 2024. We're about 4 years into this review process. The town board did rezone this site from SA to R3. In connection with that rezoning, they imposed 6 specific conditions, which we've acknowledged and will comply with, and ultimately will be the subject to a declaration of restrictions to be recorded at the Erie County Clerk's office. And that includes maximum density of 15 lots, 2.7 acres of permanent open space, ownership of most of the permanent open space by an HOA, that we include a right-of-way, potential right-of-way to Young's Road Extension, the landscaping be approved by the Planning Department in terms of Planning Board for the Dodge Road frontage, and that finally we can consider shared access to both the north and the south. Next slide. This is a plan that we presented all the way back on August 14th of this year. This is what we actually originally filed. We had 15 lots at that time, down from what I originally believe when we presented this to you in connection with the rezoning at one point was 17 lots. It was 17 lots. 2.7 acres of permanent open space, 20 feet of permanent open space along the rear of the lots. Obviously, that permanent open space along the frontage. Fences installed, 250 feet on the north side, 320 feet on the south side, and then planting of evergreen trees within that permanent open space. Next slide. Next slide. There we go. So then subsequent to that, we did, before we brought this in front of you last month, the Planning Department was kind enough to provide us with a marked up plan with their comments. And we did our best to address these. In fact, we did address them. Number one, they asked that we replace the previously proposed T-turnaround with a cul-de-sac that complies with the draft subdivision regulations. So we did that. You can see the blue circle. They also asked us to relocate a 60-foot parcel for a potential future roadway connection to the south. And this is not bright enough. No, you can't see it, which you can see highlighted there in yellow. And again, that will be right of way for a future roadway connection based on the input received from the Planning Department. Next slide. This is the updated plan we actually presented during that meeting on October 17th. You can see still preserving substantial green space, showing that potential right of way to the south that ultimately could connect to Young's Road. We lost one lot to be developed, went from 15 to 14, and then we're requiring impacts not to the wetland, but 100 feet of the adjacent area for the new NYS DEC wetland. That's the back of the site. The concern that was raised with this plan was with respect to that lot, we were just leaving it untouched. We were not proposing any improvements. It would be available and dedicated to the town, but would remain as in the meantime. Next slide. So after a couple of additional discussions with the Planning Department and review letters, we updated the plan once again. And what we're now showing is the partial installation of a stub street, which I'll show you in another detail sheet in a second. That will provide the benefit to everyone, that everyone knows there's envisioned that there will be a street cut through there in the future. Also beneficial from the perspective of the highway department, they don't have to maintain it because they can literally just push snow across until that point in the future. Mr. Rubino actually talked to the highway superintendent, Steve Floss, and he indicated that was certainly acceptable from his perspective. And then again, based on input from the planning department, to ensure that the owners of the adjacent lots 6 and 7 don't encroach on there, we'll put a line of trees on both sides. So between the curb cut that'll actually be cut in and the trees, I think it's going to be quite clear to anyone who goes onto the subdivision site that that's envisioned to be a roadway to the south. We have added a pedestrian facility for school buses as requested. We've increased the size of lots 6 and 7 because technically under the code, those now become corner lots, which means they need to comply with 2 frontages, and the minimum size is 9,750 square feet instead of 8,540. Next slide. So that's just the detail on the top left for that pedestrian school bus drop-off pickup area. It'll be concrete, but it'll be a dedicated space because generally speaking, in the town of Amherst, school buses do not go down cul-de-sacs, nor do they go down private streets. And then on the bottom right, that's the detail for that right-of-way or future lot that could accommodate the extension of a stub street to the south that then could lead to a northerly connection of Young's Road. Next slide. One of the things that we were asked to take a look at early in this process was to avoid this scenario. This is a subdivision that's relatively new on Casey Road. As you can see, the side yards that are fenced of these lots go all the way up to the street. By providing that permanent open space per input received from you back during the rezoning process, we're avoiding that, meaning you will not see the side of a house with a fence like that directly next to the right-of-way of Dodge Road because of that permanent green space. Next slide. And these are just some photos of the frontage. So that's the southern portion of the Dodge Road frontage. Next slide. That's again the southern portion. You can see there's actually a good bit of vegetation there. These are mature evergreen trees, which we can save. Next slide. That's looking a little bit to the north of the existing house. And again, you can see some pretty substantial vegetation, including those evergreen trees. Next slide. It's a northerly view actually on the project site. So it's looking off to the property off-site to the north, substantial vegetation. Next slide. These are sample home elevations. At this point, Mr. Rubino hopes to be the builder of these homes. He has a track record throughout Amherst and other communities in Western New York in connection with successful housing developments. And he's more than capable of building very nice homes. Probably the best nearby example would be Rubino Court, if you'd like to take a look. Next slide. So one of the things we have to emphasize here, and you need to consider obviously with land use decisions, is consistency with the comprehensive plan. In figure 6 of the comprehensive plan, you can see that side of Dodge Road is designated in yellow, which means it is appropriate for single family residential. That was the case long before this project was proposed. That was the case before the town board rezoned the site on July 22nd of this year. So clearly consistent with the comprehensive plan. Next slide. And then also at a meeting of the town board held in February, believe it or not, of 2022, the town board decided to have an SA zoning report, taking a look at all the parcels that are zoned SA throughout at least the northern portion of the town. And while that report, is my understanding, has never been finalized, it was presented during the town board work session by the consultant. Again, that consultant has determined that this area is appropriate for what's orange on this map, which is R3. And that includes the adjacent parcels to both the north and the south, and generally that stretch, that small stretch of Dodge Road that's currently zoned SA. Next slide. If you look at the definition of single-family residential, it's defined as 2 to 4 units per acre. Also mentions the fact that obviously that zoning and that use is relatively low density, and that one of the policies is to preserve the neighborhood fabric, quality of life, and limit undesired influences such as commercial intrusions. There's no commercial intrusions. So based on the most recent plan, we've reduced the density from 2.54 homes per acre to 2.8 units per acre. So really, we're almost at the very low end. That includes 2.7 acres of permanent open space. During the public hearing held in October, some residents said, well, that's not accurate. The density of this is not 2.08 acres. You need to subtract the permanent open space. And that's absolutely not the case. The permanent open space is being offered for their benefit and based on the input received from the town. Without that, obviously, the density could be considerably higher. We could fill in 2 more lots along the frontage, and we could install some additional lots in the rear. So ultimately, the density measured by the number of homes per acre is at the very, very low end, slightly exceeds 2 units per acre, or half of what that comp plan recommendation would allow. Next slide. That's just a zoning map of the area. There's been a lot of discussion, especially in front of the planning board, on saying, well, that area of Dodge Road, that specific side of Dodge Road constitutes its own neighborhood. And I have to respectfully disagree with that. You really need to take a bigger picture. If you look across the street, there's a higher density and much more intense subdivision. To the south, you have the Essex subdivision that's relatively recent on property zoned MFR 4A. And again, while the parcels directly to the south and north are zoned currently SA, if you look at figure 6 of the comprehensive plan, or you look at the draft of the SA zoning analysis prepared by a professional consultant, they all recommend R3 zoning there. So that's the R3 zoning's place. Again, predates our project. Next slide. In terms of the process, it's important to note, if we get through sketch plan, which we will, we still have a long, long, long way in the process. The next step would be the submission of fully engineered plans. We'll need to demonstrate compliance with a wide assortment of technical requirements. You will hold 2 separate public hearings, one in connection with seeker, one in connection with preliminary plat. After that, we'll need to go and obtain various approvals required from outside involved agencies, including county agencies. Then we will submit a final plat application with copies of the approvals from all the other agencies. You will take a last look at it in connection with final plat. We'll record a map cover at the clerk's office. We'll record the stormwater management agreement as required by the engineering department. We'll have to get PIPs. We'll have to file and get a notice of intent, and then ultimately building permits. So there's a very, very lengthy process here, and we're literally only at the 3rd bullet point, about 4.5 years into this. Next slide. I also want to emphasize, during the meeting in October, there was a lack of a quorum with respect to the vote. And a couple of the reasons that were given against this were as follows. Number one, thinking that it's really not appropriate in terms of that rural character. And then number two, expressing concerns by certain members that because they voted no on the rezoning, they should also, for purposes of consistency, vote no on the sketch plan. I would note that those are not appropriate reasons to vote to deny. Number one, the site, again, has been rezoned by the town board on July 22nd, subject to conditions. And then number two, it simply complies with the town requirements, especially based on the input received. In some instances, exceeds the current town requirements and goes more towards the actual draft amended subdivision regulations, which have not yet been adopted by the town board, but have been recommended by this board. So let's look at the code. Section 461D of the subdivision regulations sets forth the criteria for sketch plan review. And keep in mind, sketch plan review is really not an approval. It's trying to reach a consensus on a layout. And it says 2A, the arrangement, location, and width of streets in their relation to the topography of the land. We've increased the width of the right-of-way per the draft subdivision regulations, and our street width does comply with the code. Vegetation, wetlands, special flood hazard area, base flood elevations. We are not encroaching on any wetlands whatsoever. We're going to make an effort to preserve and enhance the vegetation on the southern portion of the site. We have a permanent green space declaration of restrictions area on the rear of each lots with a width of 20 feet. And then we're also preserving green space on the eastern portion of the site. So I think we meet that. Sewage disposal, drainage requirements, and water needs. We've acknowledged we'll need to comply with the technical requirements of the Town of Amherst Engineering Department, the DEC, and the Erie County Water Authority. That will come in connection with the submission of engineered plans at the preliminary plat stage. Lot size is an arrangement. Every single lot that we're proposing complies with the zoning code. Soil conditions in connection with the future issuance of a building permit. We'll have to show that the foundations of each and every home comply with the code. Recreational facilities and open space, again, 2.7 acres of permanent open space, far exceeds the amount of permanent open space provided for any other subdivision in the past decade in Amherst. Such other concerns as may be appropriate, including new streets or street extensions. We're showing the street extension to the south, and ultimately, per the policy, it'll be up to the town board whether this becomes a public or private road. And then finally, policies and recommendations of the comprehensive plan. Again, the comprehensive plan specifically designates this area as appropriate for R3 zoning, and we think we've done everything we can during the past 4 years to do our best to incorporate input from various stakeholders and still come up with a project that works. So with all that being said, we would ask that you consider these criteria. We would ask that you consider the lengthy history of the site, and rest assured, the sketch plan is approved. We still have many steps ahead of us in the process. We'll be coming back in front of you. If there's any questions, either myself or Mr. Rubino would welcome the opportunity to address them.
Thank you, Mr. Hopkins. John, any questions? No questions. Brittany?
Mr. Hopkins, were you also counsel in the Glen Meadows
Counsel for what? The
development?
Essex subdivision? Yes, I was.
And that one, on average, the building lot was half acre, right?
I'm not sure. There's considerable wetlands on that site, maybe.
Which varies significantly from what's being proposed in this one, which, if you consider Glen Meadows is actually the next nearest neighboring community, is it not?
14, 16, 20, 23. Just trying to count how many lots were there. 23 plus 7.
29 lots at Glen Meadows.
29 lots. I can't remember the acreage of that site, but
15.8.
yeah, and MFR 4A, so those lots are actually much smaller than we're proposing.
Well, from my calculations, it looks like the average on that one was half acre.
Yeah, that may be more or less correct given the wetlands. Yes, this site does not. This site, by contrast, has no wetlands except the very back line.
So don't you think in keeping with conformity of the neighborhood, that being the next nearest one, that your proposal should likewise maybe have less lots?
But we don't have that. We don't have that zoning, and I think that zoning would have been viewed negatively to allow smaller lots.
Right, but don't you think it should conform with the neighborhood?
Well, if you're going to define the neighborhood again as only one side of Dodge Road in that specific area, yes, but you got to take a look at the bigger picture, and you also got to look at the fact we're zoned R3.
Right, but the other side of Dodge Road is all those larger lots on single families, right?
No, it's smaller lots, CR3A. They're not bigger. All along the frontage, some along the frontage, but not the subdivision behind.
Right, not the subdivision, I'm talking about the lots right across the street from Dodge.
Yeah. But again, what are you going to do? It's zoned R3. It's consistent with the comprehensive plan. I think if you look at those criteria, it's going to be difficult to come up with justification to not move forward on this.
I do appreciate the installation or the suggestion of the installation of the bus.
Yeah, again,
So thank you on that.
can we make everyone happy? No, but we really have made an effort to include, input received.
Yes, you have stated that, first of all, I appreciate that you have outlined for everybody's benefit here the subdivision review process and at which step we are at this point in time and what comes later, and that the sketch plan doesn't really freeze anything. The review process, as it continues down, there'll be ample opportunity for everyone to raise their concerns. However, you're showing a certain number of lots, I think 17 with 14,
Down to 14.
14 are populated. That does sort of set a precedent.
What'd you say? I'm sorry.
It sets a precedent for the future steps.
No, So ultimately, yeah, it sets a precedent in terms of the layout, but ultimately we have to submit fully engineered plans. And keep in mind, under your own code, and I think others can confirm this, sketch plan is not technically any type of approval. It's just not.
So again, we appreciate the fact that pains have been taken to abide by the zoning regulations.
Right. It exceeds the zoning regulations.
The question is of the character of the neighborhood, okay? How far do we have to drive? Immediate neighborhood, of course, there's nothing like this, abutting it. Okay? It depends on how far you want to drive up or down Dodge Road and see, or the other Breckenridge, and see something similar. But so the question of how expansive a definition of neighborhood are we to consider?
Could we go back to that aerial, James?
Okay. Now, as you said,
Can we go to the one that I have? Thank you. So again, I don't think the neighborhood is everything on this aerial that I pulled right from the town's website. but it certainly can't just be defined as that small stretch of lots on the Dodge Road frontage. And keep in mind, even if you do want to view the neighborhood as that, we're zoned R3. I mean, the town board rezoned our site to R3. The rest of those parcels are currently zoned SA. But if the town board adopts that report that they paid for from a consultant, it'll designate those lots as appropriate for R3 in the future as well. And again, the comp plan says R3. So those parcels, while they're zoned SA, they're inconsistent with the adopted comprehensive plan that says R3.
Not disputing your abiding by the zoning conditions. Okay, I think we've stated that. You're looking at the immediate or next to immediate character of the immediate or the next to immediate neighborhood. Now, as you have said yourself, all the properties with frontage and Dodge on the east, north, south, on the west, north, and south are much larger lots.
Right, but zoned different.
Well, we understand that, yes. We appreciate that you are not violating any zoning conditions of the new zoning. Just comparing it to everything immediately to its north, its south, and the west. Okay, of course, there's east, there's nothing.
Well, the parcel directly to the east is all wetlands.
Right.
Behind us.
We're not talking about east.
So as you can see, it has no frontage.
Right. So I'm just talking about the existing properties, and they only exist on the north and the south and the west. And
I mean, again, if you go directly across the street behind Dodge Road, you can see there's a large subdivision that's been there for decades. If you go to the south, there's subdivisions. And the difference really is it comes down to zoning. We are zoned R3, which is what the comprehensive plan recommends. The adjacent parcels are zoned SA, despite the fact the comprehensive plan recommends single family.
okay, I don't want to spin wheels anymore, so no further questions.
Joe,
No questions, thank you.
Gary. Okay, I anticipate we have some people from the general public here. I have the community spokesperson line up first, everyone else behind him.
William Pitts, 1815 Dodge Road, immediately adjacent to this property. I want to thank you for the opportunity to address you again on this matter. I'll make it short. Our neighborhood concerns still remain the same as they have for the past 3 years. This proposed sketch plan does not fit our established, unique, rural neighborhood. Our other concerns are the displacement of the wildlife. Where are we pushing them to? The added traffic. The kids, there's going to be more kids here, and there's no bus service for them. So please, I guess what I'm asking is, what are the benefits of this? How does it enhance our neighborhood? And our neighborhood is of Dodge Road. We're not talking about developments off of Dodge, which are very few to far between. How does this benefit the values of our homes? Does this help the wildlife? Does it do anything for the congestion of our road? Tell us taxpayers and the 90% of our neighborhood homeowners that are against this, how does it enhance us? The planning board has voted on this project 3 times and has been against it 3 times. All we're asking for is let's do some responsible planning here. We, the neighborhood, have suggested a change to the sketch plan. Take the road out, subdivide that property, leave it R3, but divide it into 4 to 6 lots. There'll be larger lots, all with Dodge Road addresses. Now that change will fit our established rural, unique neighborhood. This is a change that us residents can agree with. Nothing we have asked for has made it to this sketch plan. In your BCP, 8.9, it says, neighbors need to best determine, neighborhoods need to be best determined by local residents. That's us. 10.2.2, the characterization, these characterizations combined to a physical environment that is unique and essential part of Amherst character. As noted by the residents, the rural character and low-density housing in Amherst reflects the ability to choose between radical different lifestyles of living within one town. A variance of lifestyle, I apologize here, and housing choices range from urban to suburban to rural, is one of the cornerstones of the comprehensive plan's vision statement. Thus, the comprehensive plan for Amherst emphasizes stabilizing and preserving the rural character. Major strategies include controlling of the local and density of the new development, integrating context to maintain the character of rural roads. Side note here, it has the Amherst concept plan emphasizes preserving rural character. Many of us multi-generation families who have lived on Dodge for many years, we have supported the town for decades. We, the residents, would appreciate your continued support to deny this sketch plan, as you did 3 years ago. Please, don't turn our road into another Casey Road, where there's a development cut in on every large parcel of property, and from Mughal to Casey School, there's now 18 roads going into developments. That used to just be a simple country road like Dodge was. All we're asking for is let's do it responsibly. You owe it to us and our kids. Again, no road on Dodge and large parcels which will fit our neighborhood. That takes care of it for the neighborhood spokesperson. Now I'll talk to you as me. Now my concerns, I am the adjacent landowner. I foresee a property line issue coming. My family has been in my house for 72 years, taking care of the property, giving me a 20-foot buffer. That's a car length. Having 7 people's yards facing my yard, that's not acceptable. They'll have lights on in their backyards, just like that new development does. And I can actually see them from my house. I can see that new development. That's seeing over 700 feet. It's all clear. That's where all the animals live too. I was at Sandy's house the other day and we were talking about this, and we literally seen somebody take a garbage can of yard waste and throw it in her backyard. That happens to me, the police are being called and somebody's going to jail. That's unacceptable. As the sketch plan is now, it doesn't work for me. I would request a berm being placed at the back edge of the lots with a fence on top of that. This would minimize any trespassing on my property. For 70 plus years, I've only had one neighbor on the right and one neighbor on the left. I watch the deers, the foxes, the wild turkeys, sometimes some coyote also. They use this land. This is their food. This is where they live. Where are we going to push them? Out into the street so we can hit them with our cars? right now, I've already, it's, what is going to happen to my property value? No one's gonna want to buy my house with a subdivision right next to it. I will lose. This project doesn't enhance my life in any way, not even a little bit. Now, if the sketch plan turns the houses in the other direction, facing Dodge Road, dividing the property, as I said before, into 4 to 6 lots as R3, my life would not be impacted or destroyed. It is said you want our input. Well, to date, none of what we have asked or suggested has made it to this sketch plan. He has put a stub to connect to a development that is 2 properties away. Why isn't there a stub on my side then? For future connectivity. Because further development, because planning to go to my direction is like waiting for Young's Road to continue. That is stopped on Casey Road. It's been proposed since the 50s, and it hasn't happened yet. I want to see responsible building, not this willy-nilly plan going on. We don't need another dead-end road. Remember, every intersection is a breeding ground for traffic accidents. Just one happened the other day on Dodge Road, and I have pictures of it, where a truck and a trailer pulled out in front of a town truck, and the town truck hit the trailer. Please show us, you members of the planning board, you want to do the responsible building, not just give in to these greedy developers that do what they want and get away with it. It's not right.
Thank you.
Sandy Mack, 1790 Dodge Road. Almost 4 years ago, I signed a petition along with my neighbors opposing this proposal. 3 years ago, you, the planning board, after careful consideration, denied this project. You concurred with us, the residents, that it is not in character with our established rural neighborhood and is not consistent with the Bicentennial Comprehensive Plan. You even sent the town board a letter asking them to deny it. Unfortunately, the town board approved the rezoning of the property, not the subdivision. So now the property is rezoned to R3 instead of suburban agricultural. All this means is it is zoned for single-family dwelling with a minimum of 65 feet of frontage. My family had my house built 67 years ago. I have always had one neighbor directly across the street and on both sides of my house. I do not want to look out my front window and see 14 houses there, even if there will be vegetation, which will take years to mature, and a fence, which none of us have in our front yards. I do not want a public roadway across from my home with car lights constantly in my living room. I enjoy looking out my front window and watching the wildlife there. It is so peaceful and relaxing. I suggest the property be subdivided into 4 to 6 houses, all on Dodge Road with no public roadway. This would be consistent with our neighborhood and the Bicentennial Comprehensive Plan. It would conform and be harmonious with the nearby areas and structures on our section of Dodge Road, and it will fit the character of our established rural neighborhood. It would also reduce the volume of traffic by having less cars on this section of Dodge Road. You have denied this proposal before. I ask your support again in denying this site plan. My family has supported the town for decades. I think it is time for the town to support the residents. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Nancy Fender, 101 Main Street. We agree with a couple of things Mr. Hopkins had to say. Yes, it is zoned R3. And yes, it does somewhat follow the Bicentennial Comprehensive Plan. However, if you look at the zoning code, it's different. So the residents opposed the sketch, site plan, whichever you wish to refer to it as, because it's a major subdivision which does not fit in this neighborhood at all. We respect Mr. Rubino's desire for a subdivision. However, it should be a minor subdivision, meaning 4 to 6 houses, all with Dodge Road addresses. This type of subdivision fits in with the neighborhood, along with the zoning codes. We will not fight. They will not fight for a minor subdivision, but we will continue to fight a major one. We hope you, the planning board, will agree with us. Yes to a minor subdivision, but no to a major subdivision such as that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Planning Board, thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. My name is Cheryl Anastasia, 1860 Dodge Road. I've done quite a bit of renovating. I've been here since 2000. I've done quite a bit of renovating, a dormer consisting of a master bath and closet, creating an ensuite for my bedroom. First floor bath gutted and renovated, all new windows which tilt out, siding, roof tear off, hardwood floors. Permits were pulled for all of this. The reason I'm telling you this is I am a lifer. I've been here for 24 years. I hope they pull me out in a body bag. I am staying. Not a lifer like Bill Pitts. He's third generation. It was his grandfather's property. Jay Pierce, he's second generation. He's my neighbor to the left. Carol Mack, second generation. Her parents purchased the house. This is our neighborhood, our community. Our neighborhood from 1875 Dodge through 1720 Dodge. It's the Pierces through the Fiegels. There are 15 homes on 29.40 acres. It averages about 1.96 acre per property. I have 1.29. Dodge Road is lovely, quiet, peaceful, beautiful. It's home. Presently, there are 3 approved major subdivisions going on within 1.3 miles of my house. Miller's Crossing, Natali Builders, 82 new homes on 7 acres, Glen Meadow, Essex Development on Dodge Road, 32 homes on 14.4 acres, and Fairwood, Essex again, Heim Road, 24 homes on 7 acres. The density now is 138 homes on 28.5 acres, so that's approximately 0.21 per acre, with a maximum of 276 people and cars, all within 1.3 miles of my house. There are also apartment houses, the Corbel at Dodge and Campbell, and then Dodge on the Green nearby. With 1789 subdivision proposed, and he had the zoning was approved to R3, there are an additional 14 homes. This subdivision is exactly 2 houses from Essex Meadow. It's a subdivision, 2 residential homes, another subdivision. Essex Glen Meadow has a street cutting onto Dodge for 32 homes. So will 1789, 14 homes. So it's a street, 2 residential houses, another street. Is this keeping with the integrity of our little community? All requirements are being met due to the zoning ordinances for 1789, but does it make it right? These are not driveways, they're streets, 2 houses, streets. I can't even believe it was passed to have 2 subdivisions so close together. J. Pierce, 1875 Dodge Road, he was unable to attend and wanted me to add, developers always get zoning changes. It creates revenue for Amherst. Please keep our neighborhood's integrity. Enough is enough. Vote down this development as proposed and approve a minor subdivision with no streets. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Lisa Rockwell. How does this work? I am the neighbor to the other side on 1765 Dodge Road. And I don't need to be repeating, they have addressed a lot of the concerns. I'm an avid gardener. I do organic gardening, so I worry, if this comes to be as is, I worry about pesticides, about in all of the subdivisions, people do Roundup everywhere. We know Roundup is, my case, big no-no. It's I don't even understand how people even use it anymore. It causes cancer. It's I do not want the pesticides blowing into my garden where I grow my vegetables. Very upset like with all of that. I love that I had neighbors that don't spray. And then what Bill said, like the burr, like on the bottom there, like I'm a big fan of that, of like putting a burr in, because then the wildlife can still cross, and they do. They have their little path, like it goes right along there, then across my property, then they cross the creek right over there. Like they need that back area, but then where the road is going to be, or hopefully not, but if it's going to be there, like also people will walk there. They'll walk right into my yard. Like there is no fence, there's nothing, because it's open. It's the back of my yard is left wild for the wildlife. So like some sort of a marking on that property line would be great, and the burr would be ideal, because the wildlife still needs to be able to cross. You cannot just, fence it and then they can't get through. Then the fence, like in the front there, I really hate the vinyl fencing. Yeah. Oh, there we go. I have to hold it, but I got it. Like that fencing, I really hate vinyl. If that comes to be, please make it wood. Okay. Then when you're cutting down the trees, if that comes to pass, please do not do it during nesting season. That breaks my heart. That whole other subdivision, they did it all during nesting season. All the birds had just built their things, and like I was in my yard and I was like, I can't go outside. I can't watch it. It's sad. And just because it's legal doesn't make it right. Thank you.
Are there any other comments, questions from the general public? No? Mr. Rubino or Mr. Hopkins, response?
Hi, Joe Rubino, the petitioner. Thanks for having me here tonight. Just wanted to respond to a couple things. Well, first of all, about me, I'm an Amherst resident, my own house for 38 years. I grew up in Amherst. My kids all went to Amherst schools, Williamsville schools. I've been a real estate broker for 37 years. I've built subdivisions like Sean had mentioned in Amherst and Clarence, hundreds of homes. I've done successful developments, from putting the infrastructure in and building all the homes. I ended up selling people's houses. So again, I'm not a greedy developer. I come in and I provide housing, and there's a need for it. A few meetings ago, there was a speaker that came up and said that there's so many houses for sale in Amherst. Why do you need more houses? And there was another person tonight that said all these subdivisions recently in Amherst. Well, in the last year, closed sales in Amherst, there were almost 900 homes. Anyone can tell me the average day on the average days on the market? You'll be surprised. It's 9 days for almost 900 homes that have closed in Amherst. So there is clearly a demand. With the location on Dodge Road, it's not unique as far as having a subdivision. There's subdivisions throughout the town that are very similar. We just had one recently on Air Road, Gessel Woods, that was put in. Well, those lots up and down Air Road are very deep. They're large lots. And here it is, that fit in well. It's sold out quickly. It's a cul-de-sac street, and there are no issues there. Up and down Mughal Road, there's Bryce Landing, there's Morgan Home subdivision. Years ago, there was a Brown Shuttle development. They're all, it's a country type setting, and these roads fit in wonderfully, and they're occupied. Another one right off of Paradise Road that was put in across from the pickleball court. So again, with our plan evolving, which it has, originally with the lots right up against Dodge Road, with having a T turnaround that probably, with the new subdivision regulations, I'll admit to that, it's a good change to have the cul-de-sac. I think it's better for the residents and better for the highway department and, fire trucks. Open space has been talked about a lot. Well, this open space, especially in the back behind the cul-de-sac, it's actually usable. It's mowed grass where these residents here and anyone else that wants to park on that road, it will be accessible. So again, you can go back there, you can bring your dog back there, you can bring your grandkids back there. It's not it's not similar to the Essex development down the street where the space that was given to the town and any type of space, they did it because it's wetlands. This is not wetlands. This is just it's in the floodplain. The lots at the Essex subdivision, these are larger than the lots. Essex had more land, so if you divide it up, sure, it seems like their lots are larger, but they're not. The square footage on every Essex lot is smaller than these lots that are proposed. So I just want to give everybody my guarantee that, I will work with the neighbors. I've heard a couple comments. Lisa Rockwell, that, possibly a berm, possibly a wooden fence to try to keep a more natural look. Mr. Pitts even said something, about a berm. So again, that's the process where between myself and if they want to meet with us, meet with Sean, meet with my engineer, meet in the planning department, I'm here for you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm just going to be 30 seconds. So in terms of this decision, I just want to make clear again and remind residents, a lot of them are saying do the right thing, support us. You did do that at the rezoning, but the scenario is far different now, meaning it really doesn't come down to a decision whether you like it or not. It comes down to a decision or not whether it follows the code. And again, it's consistent with the comp plan. It's consistent with the R3 zoning. Whether you feel that should have happened or not, it did happen. And then it's also consistent with the criteria specified for R3. So with all of that being true, we do think that this should be approved. Again, early in the review process, it'll probably be refined as we go forward, but we think we've met the requirements to mandate you approving the sketch plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Close the hearing on that. Let's move on to item number 3. 1790, 1860, 1920 North French Road, 999 Campbell Boulevard. Mr. Hopkins again.
Good evening, Sean Hopkins on behalf of the applicant, SBLC Development. Also with me is Elliot Lasky, one of the owners of that entity, as well as Don Griebner, a certified licensed appraiser from Real Estate Property Services, LLC. These are the parcels that we're looking at tonight. You actually did look at these once before during your May meeting. So obviously you can see North French Road is here. The Lockport Express area, or I-990, is here. The project site does not include these 4 parcels, and this is actually a utility corridor right away that bisects these parcels. It's actually 1920 North French Road. Next slide. So this is a concept plan that we presented you on May 16th that ultimately you were not in favor of in connection with the comp plan amendment. What we were seeking then was 3 different zoning classifications from SA to SC3, which is a mixed-use district, MFR5, and R3. We're showing 2 4,000 square foot first floor mixed-use buildings along North French, 22nd floor apartments, 86 attached townhomes here. We're showing 55 lots for single family homes here, and then 64 multi-family units kind of clustered there along the I-990. And of course, included all the other improvements that would be needed. Next slide. We also, in connection with that hearing on May 16th, because the planning department's position was this is more appropriate for research and development / industrial, we showed a plan that would, what would be permitted by that based on the existing wetlands, which would have kind of been a road coming in and a road bisecting and going here. We would have had basically 7 lots that would be there for industrial, warehouse, et cetera, et cetera. Not very big lots compared to what the demand is typically for that type of use now, but that's what we would have been left with. And again, The planning, not the planning department, the town specifically early in this process asked us to put our project on hold for 2 years so they could see if they could market the site to a third-party user. We had no expression of interest. So no one ever came to the table, even willing to sign the letter of intent. Next slide. So what happened is, because time passed, the Army Corps of Engineers, even though we still had a valid jurisdictional determination, came out and required us to do an updated wetland delineation report, which of course we didn't want to do, but we had no choice. That report is dated August 26th and was submitted to the planning department. And unfortunately, but expectingly, the wetlands grew very substantially. So we're now stuck with nearly 19 acres of wetlands. Federal, we have some state wetlands, we have adjacent area, and we have 3 what I call ditches, but 3 streams that the Army Corps has asserted jurisdiction of. So that area on 1920 North French, which would have accommodated the future connection to Cross Point and had townhomes here, that is entirely now a wetland. So based on that, we had to go back to the drawing board, and obviously we substantially reduced our developable acreage. Next slide. So this is the updated concept plan, the comp plan amendment plan that, again, you're not viewing the zoning now, you're just viewing what land use is appropriate. What we're now showing, based on that new wetland information, is 57 townhomes, which are here. We've eliminated the mixed-use buildings. We have 36 lots for single-family homes, which would be zoned R3. We have 32 multifamily units here. There would be a roadway connection out to North French here and 1 here. We have 33.71 acres of permanent open space, so more than half of the site preserved as permanent open space. And we've reduced the residential density from 225 units when we presented this in May, all the way down to 125 units. And this layout would require us to impact some wetlands, but a very small amount. And based on the input we've received from the Army Corps of Engineers, we believe we could ultimately obtain a permit. Next slide. And then again, because the planning department's request is that this would be more appropriate suited for industrial distribution use, Anthony Pandolfi took the wetlands per the updated wetland delineation report and laid them over the industrial layout. And now all we're left with is 4 parcels. We're left with only 9.48 acres that can be developed. Those parcels would not be particularly big. Parcel 1 and 2 would be 2.5 acres. It could be different if you wanted to. Parcel 3 would be 3.03 acres. And finally, parcel 4, which is unfortunately separated by a wetland, would only be 1.44 acres. The depth of those parcels would only be 200 feet. Now that sounds deep, but for generally the demand is typically for larger warehouses, distribution facilities. No way you can accommodate an 80,000, 100,000, 120,000 square foot warehouse or distribution facility. And under this plan, we would only impact 1.02 acres of non-jurisdictional but regulated adjacent area. Next slide. So I did ask them to prepare a concept plan for just one of those lots. This is the lot 1 out along North French Road. And at maximum, what we could fit there is a 28,000 square foot warehouse, a loading dock here, some parking along the front and the back. Not where the demand is at in the market in 2024. Much larger footprints, larger parking. And in terms of these types of buildings, these buildings are not uncommon throughout West New York today. So to build a new building, there's no way it'll compete with existing buildings that have already been built. Next slide. It's figure 6 of the comprehensive plan. I think everyone agrees, including the planning department, that a majority of the site, the designation as recreation, open space, and greenways, probably not appropriate. This has always been privately owned land. My clients have actually owned this land for decades. They actually owned it prior to the 990 being installed. And then a small portion, a very small portion, directly adjacent to Cross Point is designated as industrial office, but only a small part. Next slide. This is figure 6 of the comprehensive plan. It is important to note that the adjacent property, Cross Point, has been designated as appropriate for mixed residential, mixed use, which means it can include residential uses, despite the fact it's a very large office park. Next slide. An aerial photograph of the surrounding vicinity. Again, Cross Point next door, my client's site here. And I want to highlight this yellow parcel which was rezoned at the request of Uniland to do DC5 a couple of years ago, based on a recommendation they received from this board as well. Next slide. So that's Cross Point as it exists today. And again, Corey presented a project earlier tonight that involves some parking on one of those blue parcels. So currently, based on most recent information online, there's still 28 acres available. Keep in mind, that was built 2 decades ago. It has a huge competitive advantage compared to our site in that, number one, the infrastructure is already in place. It's all built out. It's also a certified shovel-ready through a Build New York Now program. And again, despite all that fact, the Uniland requested and obtained a rezoning of this portion of their site directly next door to us to DC5 to accommodate apartments. And again, we're asking for residential use as well. Next slide. So this is to show, this is actually the approved site plan that came in front of this board for 152 apartments on that parcel. Way higher density, more intensive zoning, literally directly next door in an existing office park. So I think it's hard to say what we're proposing would be incompatible with that area or incompatible in terms of the comp plan. Next slide. It's important to note that has not yet been built. So back in April of this year, the planning department issued a memorandum basically with its reason as to why the comp plan amendment shouldn't be approved. And I want to touch on the points in there very briefly. Number one, that there's very little open, undevelopable land available south of North French Road, which is a historic dividing line of suburban and rural character. Again, I want to point out Cross Point is clearly on the northern side. There's other large-scale uses on the northern side. We have sanitary sewers, we have water, we have the infrastructure, and again, we're not way out to the north. We're on North French Road. Two, there's a acknowledgement in the comment that there are natural resources, including wetlands. At that point, they were 7.5 acres. Now they've doubled. And obviously, we have to make an effort to minimize wetland impacts. So if we were going to propose R&D use, it's simply really not going to be feasible because the wetland impacts are going to be too large, especially in light of the fact that the Army Corps of Engineers forced us to conduct a redelineation, and a lot of the areas we previously envisioned as potentially be developable are no longer there. Three, it references figure 6 and a portion of the site being appropriate for industrial office and why that's a good thing. We acknowledge that if you look at figure 6 today, a small portion of the site is designated as appropriate for industrial. Generally, it's designated as appropriate for green space, which is the green color. Simply stated, we think what we're proposing is more appropriate than research and development and warehouse uses. Next slide. 4 is a mention to a plan done in 2023 by a consultant retained by the town, RKG, and they did indicate that this site would be appropriate for this type of use. The problem is they're saying regional demand for warehouse space due to high volume e-commerce spending is the ideal strategy for this decision. The site's frontage to the I-990 offers a viable development market opportunity for warehouse distribution facilities. First of all, we only have a tiny bit of frontage on North French Road. And second of all, if we could attract and had room to attract a big e-commerce user with a need for a warehouse, we would love to. The town tried, we've tried, and we just don't have enough developable acreage to do that. I think we can all agree what we don't want is what I see, those small warehouses that are filled with various contractors. They store all their equipment outside. It's really not a use that I think is beneficial to the town. Number 5 was the fact that North French Road is a minor arterial roadway directly adjacent to the I-90 and therefore appropriate for higher volume traffic. Yeah, we agree with that. It's also a perfect reason for it to be developed for residential, close proximity to UB, a relatively short commute to downtown given where you are, a relatively short commute to Niagara County because of the 990. So all those reasons support what we're requesting as well. People can simply hop on and off the I-990. And then 6 is mentioned that what we're proposing is traditional suburban development that maximizes building density on vacant, undeveloped land. I don't think that's true. Number one, we've reduced it by 100 units voluntarily. Number 2, I don't view it as being traditional suburban development. It's mixed residential. You don't find a lot of mixed residential sites in the town of Amherst. We have single family homes, attached townhomes, apartments, all living on the same site. The type of planning objective that I think we should encourage. There is a demand for this type of housing in Amherst, clear as day. You heard Mr. Rubino's stats as a broker, and we know we can meet that demand. There's not many other locations where you're not going to be directly adjacent to a neighborhood, which is what we heard about in connection with the previous hearing, that would be more appropriate for this. Next slide. We've also in our application provided justification for our position that it is appropriate. One of the goals of the comp plan, again, policy 8.2, is to promote the development of a variety of housing types. We're doing that. We're directly adjacent to a highway. And again, if you view that area, Uniland, that owns a Cross Point Business Park that's been very successful, they've asked for residential zoning and they did receive it. And again, that's a successful office park that's been there for 20, 25 years. We simply can't wait 2, 3, 4 decades to find potentially very small warehouse and industrial users. Next slide. And obviously, ultimately, the town board will be responsible for a seeker determination. We have submitted an EAF. We have submitted a traffic study. We acknowledge if and when this would require site plan approval, we'll have to comply with a whole host of technical requirements. We're willing to work with the planning department in terms of architecture and quality of the materials. And we don't think at the end of the day, this project will result in any potentially significant adverse environmental impacts. If there's any questions about why we think this is different from before and what we're currently proposing, I would welcome the opportunity to address them.
Thank you. John, questions? Brittany?
You would agree there's just not a lot of industrial space in Amherst, right?
I would say there's quite a bit that's available for development where there's already buildings.
Where else around?
And I'm going to actually, our consultant, Don Griever, I'm going to let him address that question because he's done the analysis.
Wow.
Anyone else?
Well, yeah, you want to address that now?
Yeah, go
Why don't we do that now while we're on the
Don has a very brief presentation, so could we just give him a couple minutes to walk through it?
Sure, sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Part of this, I want to get this.
Okay, go.
Thank you.
Good evening, members of the planning board. My name is Don Griebner. I'm a New York State certified general real estate appraiser. I've been doing commercial appraisals for over 30 years. I was asked by Attorney Hopkins to analyze the economic viability of the 62-acre parcel under 2 different scenarios. One scenario being an R&D zoning and the other being a combination of R3 and MFR5. I'll speak fairly quickly because my points are all laid out in writing for you. My analysis begins by examining the legally allowable uses under those multiple zoning ordinances, which I've done. The second step in the process is to narrow down those legally allowable uses to physically possible uses. What can physically fit and be appropriate on this site? And then you narrow that down further to what's economically viable. So legal, physical, economically viable. Conclusion number 1, the extensive impact of wetlands, and you've seen the maps, on this subject site severely limits economically viable development options. Over 17 acres of wetlands, over 4,100 lineal feet of jurisdictional stream. And all of this on a highly irregular shaped parcel. Conclusion number 2, there is no permitted use under the R&D zoning ordinance that would allow for an economically viable development. There is not. Point 3, at most 11 acres, Sean had 9 point something, of the subject site would be developable as R&D land. However, the infrastructure, the roads and the utilities would far exceed the value of the usable land. You have 63 acres of which only 10 to 11 are developable, and it would cost more than the land would be worth to get to those sites and develop them. This option does not work. Number 4, the concept site plan put forth by the owners provides an economically viable residential development option due to its low density and ability to design a flexible layout which accounts for the wetlands. The wetlands are used as buffer areas, green space, retention ponds, all positive uses of wetlands. Number 5, the proposed residential development plan will meet a clear need in Amherst for additional housing options. Multiple price points will be available. For rent, for sale options will be available. It'll be 125 units total on 62 acres. Next, the proposed residential development plan will provide significant and near-term tax revenue. My initial calculation would show over $300,000 a year to the town and over 1.1 million total taxes per year after a 3 to 4 year build out and absorption. R&D land, if it were even feasible, would take 5 to 10 years to sell off those 4 or 5 sites, and less than half of the tax revenue would be generated. There are multiple and sufficient vacant land options in and around Amherst for R&D and for warehousing and for light industrial, as well as existing vacant space which is already built out. The third page of my handout shows you just a sampling of what I found as available space. We already talked about Cross Point, 28 acres available. Worley Drive, 16.5 acres with AqueQuest. Transit Road, Millersport, another AqueQuest site, 93 acres. Commerce and Creekside have existing buildings available. And then we also compete with Lancaster. They have Eastport Commerce Park, 120 acres. They finally sold a 10-acre site after years and years of being available. Point number 8. It was stated in the correspondence, which I covered and read through, between the planning department people. Their quote, "The key characteristic of this project is its proximity to large capacity transportation infrastructure and complementary land use." My response to that is, the key characteristic of this project site is its overwhelming impact of wetlands. I'm skipping forward now. The next statement, they said, the proposed project does not promote housing affordability. It absolutely does. It promotes housing affordability with multiple residential options: townhome, patio home, multifamily, for rent, for sale. The patio home option would be particularly attractive to the senior lifestyle. So with all of that said, it is clearly not viable to develop this site with R&D options.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Let me start the question over again in light of the new end of the presentation. John, do you have any questions for either Mr. Hopkins or Mr. Griebner? Ready?
Well, I do. I see you did this list of vacant land, but I also see that you didn't compare that to what is proposed in our comprehensive plan. So don't you think that's a bit misleading? That while there might be some available lands that you've identified, that that's not actually necessarily in conformance with what's projected in the comp plan?
All of which is trumped by the fact this is not a feasible site for development.
That's what your focus on is presenting that this is a
Correct.
non-feasible site.
And I showed other options for warehousing, R&D, light industrial development sites.
On page 3, right. But my point is, those parcels, you didn't compare to what is in the comp plan on whether or not those particular parcels are in line with what the comp plan would suggest they should be.
Yeah, they're in areas that I believe the town had designated as appropriate for industrial and office, of
I
course.
definitely don't think the Creekside address, so I would disagree.
That's an existing building for lease.
Right,
So it's already,
but you would agree that the comp plan might suggest it should be something else.
So that's in the Audubon Industrial
Creekside.
Park, designated as appropriate for industrial. Has been for decades.
what I'm trying to say is, even if this were developable, we're not pulling it out of a mix that's in desperate need in this town. We have sufficient options, but this isn't even an option. That's what I'm trying to focus on. This parcel does not work.
And again, my clients did sit for 2 years at the request of the supervisor. We met with the IDA to see if they could come up with a suitable R&D warehouse use, and I think they made an effort, but they couldn't. There was actually no results. So suggests there's no demand. But again, most importantly, we didn't want to go out and do a new wetland delineation. We're just not left with much property.
And the cost to put those roads in to reach those sites that they showed would more than disqualify this from being economically viable. You couldn't afford to do it. Wouldn't make economic sense.
Harb, do you have any questions for either gentleman?
Yes, I do. We as members of the planning board, well, personally, I I'm not a business person, therefore I'm not going to question your conclusion that this is economically viable. Okay? I'm sure that as an astute business person, you will not pursue or propose something which does not have prospects. So we really, that's sort of irrelevant for us. We are not here to judge the economic viability of the project. And so any question I have actually quite parallel to what Ms. Penberthy has already said, that it's comparison to the existing comprehensive plan. And when you say that that is not viable economically, they tried, and there were no takers, and therefore this is about the only use of this property or of this land that you can think of. Is that convincing enough? I'm not sure at this point.
I see the comprehensive plan as a macro view of the town. I see what we have just presented as a micro view of this parcel. And this information wasn't available when the comprehensive plan was put forth. They wouldn't take a non-viable property and designate, because it's next to the 990 and it's near through it, it suddenly becomes a viable property. No, it doesn't. It should be investigated as such. You should attempt, and that's exactly what we've done. We've tried to make it work with an R&D designation, zoning, and it doesn't. So we followed the steps, but we took the micro analysis, which goes a lot further than the macro.
Well, as you all know, the planning board is, in this case, and it is in advisory capacity. The town prepared the comprehensive plan, and so we let the town decide.
Right.
Thank you.
Joe, any questions?
Oh, were there any other questions for me?
Let me see if these two. Joe?
No further questions, Sean.
How about you, Fury? Okay. Well, with that, I'm assuming you, do we have anyone from the general public with any questions or comments?
Well, my name's Elliot Lasky. I'm the president of SBLC. I've owned the subject premises since 1988. I've been a developer in the town of Amherst since 1975. I've put in thousands of lots and built well over 1,500 homes. 2.5 years ago, we sat with the supervisor and talked to his planning board chairman to try to design an R&D use for the property. They had 2 years to do so. This is before we found out that the wetland substantially grew since our last application. Why was it originally put forth as recreational in the comp plan? I gave the supervisor several months ago the original DEIS from Cross Point, which gratuitously and without our knowledge designated all our land as wetlands, which is not correct.
Can I interrupt you for a second?
Yes.
I'm getting the sense this is part of the same presentation that your counsel and your advisor gave you here.
Yes, it is.
I want to make sure that we're still within the time constraints here. He's got 3 minutes. Is that part of the same 15? I mean, we have 15 minutes for a presentation. We're over 15 right now. I want to stick by the rules.
But I thought subsequent speakers are allowed to speak.
I'm sorry?
I thought, under your rules, subsequent speakers are allowed to speak for or against the project.
Okay. But this, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is your property. This is what you want to
This
develop.
is my project. This is my property. Yes.
So you're the petitioner.
I am
You
the
have 15
petitioner.
minutes.
Yes.
We're beyond the 15 minutes.
Have you used the 15 minutes?
Between you, Mr. Hopkins, and your advisor, we're well beyond 15 minutes.
Okay. I
I understand the point you're making. I think it's been received up here regarding the 2 years that you gave the town board and all that. I think that point's been made. But I do want to keep this within the rules. If I got to hold all these other folks to the rules, I can't play favorites here.
Okay. I think I have points that are really critical for a decision, but if you don't want to hear them, What can I do?
Again, it's 15 minutes per presentation. Now, is there anyone from the general public who is not part of the petitioner that has any questions or comments that they would like addressed with regard to this petition? Hearing none, I'll close the hearing. All right, that's that. All right. Do we need 5 minutes? Okay, we're gonna take a 5-minute break. Sorry? False. That's why I'm on. You got me fast, so I must have. It's my God. Well, it was my God. Sorry. You grew up in Ireland. That was like my grandmother's house. Street by street. Block by block. 2 blocks later. Seven. Issue number one, site plan review, 3750. Williamsport Highway, 580 Crosspoint Parkway, 2360 Hopkins Road. Start off with seeker determination. Do we have a vote?
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Brittany, second by Carrie. Roll call, please. Yes.
Davis.
Yes.
Yes. McCarthy. Yes. Raphael.
Yes.
Passes 6-0. On the negative declaration. All right. Now we move on to the site plan itself. We have conditions.
There's a sidewalk waiver.
Sorry?
There's a sidewalk waiver to vote on as well.
Separate vote on that first?
Yes.
Okay. All right, we have a request for a sidewalk waiver. I think as usual, that would be unless and until the town board eventually requires it on this. Do we have a vote as to the sidewalk waiver?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion approved by Harb. Any second?
I'll second.
Brittany seconds. Roll call, please. Yes.
Davis.
Yes.
Gill.
Yes.
Yes. McCarthy. Yes. Raphael.
Yes.
Passes 6-0. Now on to the site plan issue. We do have our conditions.
I'll read the conditions as there are many people in the audience here to hear that. Number one, that the consideration of signs is specifically excluded from this approval as they require a separate review and approval by the town. Number two, that all dumpsters, trash containers, and all mechanical equipment, utility structures, meter boards, generators, including all those mounted on any of a primary structure shall be appropriately screened with a fence, wall, or landscaping. Provide gate on dumpster enclosure that shall be closed whenever dumpster is not being serviced. Enclosure shall be high enough to screen the dumpsters within. The third standard approval is, condition, is that as-built surveys, including location of utilities, be provided to the engineering department prior to issuance of certificate of occupancy by the building department. Number four, that the sites at 3750 Millersport Highway and 2360 Hopkins Road, a portion of that, be merged with the property located at 580 Crosspoint Parkway. Number five, that the requirements in the zoning enforcement officer and planning department letter dated November 1st are addressed to the satisfaction of that department. Number six, that the comments provided in the engineering department, engineering services division letter dated November 12th are addressed to the satisfaction of that division. Number seven, that the comments provided in the engineering department stormwater management officer's letter dated November 5th are addressed to the satisfaction of that officer. Number eight, that the comments provided by the town attorney's office as the right-of-way agent letter dated November 5th are addressed to the satisfaction of the agent. Number nine, that the comments provided in the New York State Department of Transportation correspondence of October 30th, 2024 are addressed on final plans and that the required permits are obtained from that department. Number 10, that the petitioner obtain any required permits from the Army Corps of Engineers. And number 11, that following the direction of the town landscape architect, additional vegetative buffering be provided along Millersport Highway in order to enhance visual screening of the vehicle use area. Those are the conditions.
I would move to approve with just the added provision to number 11 being that it should be sufficient screening year-round. Deciduous trees, correct? I think the request was for evergreen. Evergreen, so that it was year-round.
Want to say evergreen?
Evergreen, sure.
Okay. First, with respect to the 11 conditions that are written here, does everybody understand these conditions? Has everybody reviewed them? We have a proposal now to approve with these 11 conditions, but with the added proviso that the vegetation that's referred to in number 11 be evergreen vegetation. Do we understand that? All right, with
There
that-
was one other item discussed, lighting. I don't know if you wanted to,
Well, I think lighting was addressed by zoning, so I will make reference to the fact that I would hope that the indicators of the zoning enforcement officer with regard to lighting be considered, including any potential light pollution.
That would be under number 5.
Number 5, right?
Is that part of your
it is in there.
proposal?
Yeah.
Okay. Once again, we have a motion to approve from Brittany with the 11 conditions that are written here, with number 5 being the understanding that the zoning enforcement officer and planning department deal with lighting, as you've stated, and that number 11, that the vegetative buffering be evergreen along Millersport Highway. Does everyone understand the motion of Brittany with the added provisions in there? Is there a second?
Second?
Second from Joe. Roll call, please.
Shamil?
Yes.
Davis?
Yes.
Gill?
Yes.
Khan? Yes. Penberthy? Yes.
Yes.
Passes 6-0. What's that? Okay. Issue number 2. This is 1789 Dodge Road.
There are conditions proposed for that sketch plan approval.
Go ahead.
Number 1, that the rezoning of the parcel from suburban agriculture SA District to Residential District 3 be finalized. Number 2, that the proposed southerly Stubb Street be relocated to sublot number 7. Number 3, the proposed road shall be terminated with a cul-de-sac as a permanent road termination, since the future southerly stub can serve as a possible future connection to a future Young's Road extension, consistent with the town board's rezoning decision, condition number 4. Number 4, that the comment raised in the Engineers Department Engineering Services Division letter dated October 18th be addressed with the submission of the preliminary plat application. Number 5, that the comment raised in the Engineering Department's Sanitary Division letter dated October 23rd be addressed with submission of the preliminary plat application. Number 6, that the comments raised in the Amherst Fire Chiefs Association letter dated September 16th, 2024 be addressed with the submission of the preliminary plat application. Number 7, that the comments raised in the Planning Department letter dated November 6th from the Zoning Enforcement Officer be addressed with the submission of the preliminary plat application. Number 8, that plans submitted for preliminary plat review must indicate that the future road extension to the south is to be constructed to the property line with sidewalks in accordance with Section 204-3-2-4.c.5 of the Town Code, unless a waiver is granted by the Planning Board pursuant to Section 204-4-7A of the subdivision regulations. Number 9, that the applicant's request for commitment from the Town Board on the acceptance of any public roadway and associated utilities for the proposed subdivision in accordance with the proposed and adopted Section 204-4-6-2H of Town Code be acted on prior to submission of the preliminary plat. Number 10, the petitioner is required to obtain any required permits from the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. Those are the proposed conditions.
Has everyone heard the conditions? With that in mind, is there a proposal or a motion?
I would make a motion to approve, but with the additional condition that considering our sketch plan review standards, with consideration especially on lot size and arrangement, neighboring communities and their layouts, history of the site and the wetlands, the condition be that the site be limited to 13 buildable lots, drawing it closer in line with the neighboring subdivisions, and the layout thereof, including that of Glen Meadows. I think on average, that would give about half acre per buildable lot.
For the motion by Brittany with this added condition, and again, it's 13 buildable lots.
Correct.
Indicated. Is there a second?
A second.
There's a second from Joe. Roll call, please. Yes.
Davis?
Yes.
No.
Don? Henberthy? Yes. Raphael?
Yes.
That passes 5-1. Just for the record, Harvey, you want to put any reasoning on that, or any, if you don't want
Yes,
to?
I think I would like to. I believe it is a radical departure from the character of the neighborhood. It is going to forever change in a negative manner the lifestyle and financial position of the neighbors. Scores of them, many of them, all good tax-paying citizens of Amherst. As myself being resident of Amherst for about 40 years, I cannot in good conscience approve this project.
Thank you. Let me just put for the record as well, my vote as well. The presentations by everyone, I absolutely sympathize with all your positions. My position on my vote is this, though, is that the decision by the Amherst Town Board to convert this to R3 zoning, in my opinion, ties our hands to a great degree on this particular project and vote itself. Well, the hearing's over, so I can't reopen. That's probably better if you guys just talk. Yeah, we're no longer on the record right now. The hearing's closed on it. But that, I just wanted to put that back because you guys have been coming to the meetings. I think you deserve an explanation. Mine is that the R3 designation on this does change the game, so to speak, with respect to what we can do at this stage of it. But I appreciate everybody's position here. The vote passes 5-1. That's the end of that. President Director's reports.
No. Three.
Oh my God, we didn't do three. Never mind. trying to get out of here quick. Sorry. Issue number 3. We have 1790, 1860, 1920 North French Road, 999 Campbell Boulevard. And this is for a recommendation to the town board. There is no seeker on this. Is there a motion?
Make a motion to deny the rezone, so the recommendation to the town board be for denial. For the same reasons earlier stated in the previous application, this is just not in line with what's proposed in our comp plan.
Okay, we have a proposal is to deny. A yes vote means you agree with that proposal. A no vote means you do not. Is there a second?
A second.
Second for Harb. Can we have a roll call, please?
Shamil?
No.
Davis?
Yes.
Gill?
Yes.
Khan? Henberthy? Yes. Raphael?
Yes.
That passes 4-2. It is, the recommendation is then denied. Now. Okay. Again, there is no director's report this month? All right. Has everybody had a chance to review? There you go.
Second?
Second, roll call, please.
Shamil?
Yes.
Davis?
Yes.
Gill?
Yes.
Khan? Henberthy? Yes. Raphael?
Yes.
Passes 6-0. Do I hear a motion to close the hearing?
I move to close.
Second? I'll second it. It's too slow. Let me second one once in a while. Roll call, please.
Shamil?
Yes.
Davis? Gill?
Yes.
Khan?
Of course.
Passes 6-0. Thank you, everybody. What's that? Yeah, I think I'm just a voter.
Yes.
So, the abstain, you don't have to abstain anymore?